Welcome to the mysterious Book Emporium. Sucked into the fade by an ancient demon, our heroes fight to free their minds. One has already chosen the dream over his life, but what are the others? Why don't you take a seat as we begin with The Calling, chapters 13 through 16. Chapter 13. Draw your last breath, my friends. Cross the veil and the fade and all the stars in the sky. Rest at the Maker's right hand and be forgiven. Our group stands before a walled-in keep in the marshes of Orlais. The gate guard tells them that the keep's lord doesn't take in travelers and that they need to leave. Merrick tells the man that they are looking for a friend, a woman named Genevieve. The guard replies that there is no one here by that name until a voice calls from the back. The guard is then told by another that the new Seneschal's wife goes by that name. The guard then asks who they are, and Duncan pipes up that he is her brother, Bregan. When the guard is curious about the obvious difference in age and skin color, he says that he is her half-brother. The guard leaves, and the group is a bit unsure if Duncan's idea is going to work. When the guard eventually comes back, he is only allowed to let Bregan in. Duncan leaves the others behind and is led through the keep, up to a set of nice-looking apartments. Duncan is surprised to find that this is Genevieve's dream, finding it odd that a proud warrior would wish for this terrible place. He is led to his study and left there to wait. A man carrying several scrolls and wearing noble clothes walks in. Duncan realizes that it's Ghil. Ghil stares at Duncan, knowing that this isn't Bregan. He asks where he is and who Duncan is. As this is the man Duncan murdered back in reality, he is shook by his appearance before him. Just then, a kind-looking, plump woman with long white hair flowing behind her sweeps in, asking if everything is all right. It takes Duncan a moment to realize that this is Genevieve. Duncan awkwardly asks to talk to Genevieve alone. Ghil walks over to her, kisses her forehead, and tells her that it might be bad news, but he will be nearby if she needs him. And then he leaves. As Genevieve stares at Duncan, he asks if she really doesn't know. Her stare hardens. What doesn't she know? Duncan tells her that this is all a dream. She begins to get angry, threatening to throw him in the dungeons, but Duncan pleads with her to remember being a Grey Warden and the mission back in reality. Genevieve yells out that that's a dream. Bregan convinced her not to become a warden, and he is chevalier and general in the Emperor's army, with a wife and son. She then asks if this is all a dream, where is Ghil? He took a step back. He remembered that look. If there was anything about this woman who reminded him of the warrior he knew, there it was. Did that make it a good thing? He couldn't tell. He died. He's alive, she insisted, her voice steel. You're trying to take my husband away from me, the only thing that has made my life worth living, the only thing I cherish above anything else. I'm not, he protested. You don't have a husband, only because you murdered him. Genevieve then picks up a sword that was in the room, and the two fight. Eventually, she pins him to a wall. She yells that the only reason she recruited Duncan was as punishment. She was convinced he would die in the joining, a painful death, to give him a taste of what she and Ghil had to endure. She drops him, saying that she is staying here. Duncan is shocked. Has she really thought all of those things? Duncan tells her that he doesn't believe her, that he looks up to her, that she looked like she just wanted to do the right thing by recruiting him, that she is just saying all of this to make him leave. Duncan begs her not to be like Nicholas. She expresses happiness for him for being at peace with Julian. Duncan responds that he's not really with Julian, but Genevieve replies that it could be his spirit. Duncan paused. Is that what you think Ghil is? Genevieve stared off in the direction of the door, as if she could see through it. There was a yearning in her expression, a desire for something she had denied herself long ago. As a shadow slowly crossed over her eyes, he knew her answer. No, she admitted bitterly. Ghil rushes in then, asking if everything is all right. Genevieve walks to him, kisses him tenderly, and tells him that she needs to go, and she hopes she will be back soon. And then the dream ends. In the fade, the group is happy to see Genevieve out of the dream. Catriel comes back then, and Genevieve makes a move to attack her, but Merrick stops her. One last time, Catriel asks Merrick to stay with her, but he refuses. Before she goes, she asks him one thing: forgive yourself. The group walks along the streets of an elven alienage, but something is different in this dream. Everything is a bit blurry, a bit dimmer, and there are no other people around. An unease filled the air. Eventually, Duncan notices one open door, the only one they have actually seen here. They go in and their surroundings change to a richly decorated Orlesian mansion. This is also empty and dim, but soon Ghil hears something, the cries of a woman. The group follows the sound, finally reaching a door to a cellar. Down they go, the surroundings turning almost cave-like, and the group finally reaches the bottom. In a large room is Fiona, laying on the ground, her back bloodied and ripped apart from being flogged, openly sobbing. A human man with his back turned holds a whip, taunting Fiona, telling her that no circle could keep her from him. As he is about to whip her again, Genevieve calls out for him to stop. This man is the demon. He taunts the group, who tries to attack him. He is in control here, and this is not their dream. Their weapons are not real. As the others fight to no effect, Duncan goes to Fiona. He asks if she's okay, but she doesn't seem to recognize him. He goes to pick off the shackles from her hands when the demon shoves him away from Fiona. The fight continues, and eventually the demon grabs Merrick by the throat and begins to strangle him. But then a feral screams ring out in the room. It's Fiona, who shoots out raw energy towards the demon, blasting him away. This time, he is hurt. This is Fiona's dream, and now she knows that he can be hurt. Fiona and the demon shout at each other, the demon yelling that she can never escape, and from behind, Duncan sees Merrick behead the demon in one stroke, and they wake up. Fiona, who is next to Duncan, begins to cry in relief. They hug each other as the others begin to stir, all except for Nicholas. Chapter 14. And as the black clouds came upon them, they looked on what pride had wrought and despaired. Fiona feels cold after waking up. The group takes Nicholas's body and cover it in rocks, the best they're able to do at the moment. Fiona thinks that they should talk about what happened, but none of them do. They just keep walking. Fiona thinks back to her dream. The demon had impersonated the man who had bought her. When her father had died, when she was 7, she had nowhere to go. Nice people offered her a safe place to sleep and food, but she had no idea they were slavers. When Count Dorian had bought her and she saw the riches she was surrounded by, she thought she was the luckiest little girl in the world. She would soon realize her error when her purpose was made clear. The Count had bought her to dress her up, a pet whore to do what he wanted with. She would be beaten, the focus of his rage. When she was a teenager, an old mage noticed her and realized that she had magical talent. The Count had been furious that the mage talked to her and beat her. But that night was different. She had grown angry. She reached down inside, channeling that magic she had found, and killed the Count. Exhausted and beaten, she laid on the floor, resisting the whispers of demons until the Templars came. Ghil soon picks up Bregan's trail and they follow it. Fiona goes to Duncan and thanks him for saving her. He tells her to thank Merrick, for he was the one to save everyone and to think of saving Fiona. Duncan begins to think on his own dream, and noticing his discomfort, Fiona holds his hand. Then Merrick points out a door near the edge of the tide. He had been here before, and while years ago he had reached Darkspawn coming this way, the Wardens sense none now. Fiona thinks on how she has been hearing some sort of call. Something she thinks is her name, other times music. Then, the group reaches a hole to a deeper cavern. This will lead down to the Darkspawn nest. Genevieve goes to continue, but Ghil asks her to talk. She refuses and keeps walking, but Ghil stops Fiona. Without her light, Genevieve can only go so far. She eventually comes back. Ghil tells her that they have followed her to hell and back and almost have died because of her not being cautious. The two begin to argue, and eventually Genevieve goes to punch Ghil. He dodges the attack, but Hafter attacks Genevieve and bites her gauntlet. Ghil and Uther manage to drag Hafter off of her, but the gauntlet is still in the dog's mouth. Ghil apologizes to Genevieve, but this time her swing hits. Duncan and Merrick manage to hold her back from hitting him again, and that's when Fiona notices her hand. They all do. It's covered in blackened, withered flesh, just like Duncan had mentioned. Genevieve gives up at this point. She tells them it's the taint, and this is what happens to wardens who live long enough. Ghil then removes one of his gloves. He also has the black patches. Uther as well rolls up her sleeves to show them. Both report it had begun once they got down further in the deep. The group is unsure why this is happening. It's not because of being too close to the spawn. There had never been any reports of that. And Ghil and Uther shouldn't be this far along towards the calling. Duncan and Fiona both report not having anything. Genevieve then says that the brooches they have seemed to be working at the moment, for there are no darkspawn around them, and they should hurry along before the darkspawn catch up. But Ghil refuses. They need to rest first, and she finally agrees. Fiona dreams of a battlefield surrounded by the bodies of dead wardens. Above, the sky is filled with rolling black clouds. From the field of bodies, she sees something giant rise from it, but she looks away, not wanting to see. It's terrible and horrible and coming for her. And she wakes up in camp. The others are asleep, minus Genevieve, who is on first watch. But she hears a whisper, asking if she's all right. It's Merrick. She apologizes for waking him, and he lies back down. Fiona walks away from the group and begins to check her skin. No sign of the corruption yet, thankfully. She leans back and tries to listen to the strange thing she keeps hearing, unsure of what it is. And that's when she hears footsteps. It's Merrick. He says that he is unable to sleep and sees she can't sleep either. She thanks him then and asks how he broke out of his dream. Merrick tells her that he made a promise to repay her and he just had to see it through. Fiona is surprised. How unexpected. Merrick is a good man. Merrick turns to her and begins to say that the man he saw in her dream, he's nothing like that. He knows she isn't fond of him, but he would never do anything like that to anyone. And Fiona agrees. She tells him her life story, that she was his slave until she was 14. While magic is a curse to some, it was freedom to her, and she vowed to not be in the circle and the wardens were her freedom. She begged to be recruited. Merrick then goes on to tell his life story, how his mother was murdered, how he killed his lover. Everything he did in his life, he did it for Ferelden and nothing more. She asks why he is telling her this, and he responds that everyone has their nightmares, and he holds her hand. Then, she leans in to kiss him. When he doesn't pull away, she goes in more passionately. As Fiona begins to undress, Merrick expresses concern. Here? Now? What about the others? She doesn't care. He explains that he has bad memories down here. If he... again... But she shushes him. He stopped and looked at her with such an ache of loneliness it almost broke her heart. She slowly stroked his cheek. I am tired of pain. So tired. Aren't you? His answer came as he leaned in, his kiss gentle as if he thought her fragile. And then another followed. And then another. Damned be the darkness, she thought. She let the light of her staff extinguish. Chapter 15. And so we burned. We raised nations, we waged wars, we dreamed up false gods, great demons who could cross the veil into the waking world, turned our devotion upon them, and forgot you. Genevieve moves alone in the cavern. She had left the others behind because she knows that further on will be a one-way trip. Further in, the light from the fungus on the wall is able to light her way. She knows that when the others wake up, they will find her gone and leave back to the surface, as they should. She can find Bregan on her own. As she moves in deeper, she can feel him. He's so close and she knows it, but the song in her head makes it harder for her to concentrate. She had begun to hear the calling before they even left for Ferelden, but she wanted to find her brother. She wanted to lead the wardens for a few years before submitting, to prove that she was a good leader, so she had hidden it. She finds it odd that there are no darkspawn about. Normally, when one is attacked, they swarm like bees, but they have just up and left. Where did they go and why? Genevieve then notices a single darkspawn coming. She hides behind a rock, doing her best not to be noticed. Eventually she spots it, a Hurlock wearing darkspawn armor. She jumps to kill it quickly, but it calls her by name, and at that moment, she knows it's Bregan. His skin is black and his eyes are red, but she can see it's him. What has happened to him? He tells her that they have kept the darkspawn away, but it only works for so long. She wonders who the other they are, but he continues. He said that he knows of a way to stop the blights forever, and he wants her to follow him, and she does. As the group wakes up, Ghil is angry that he agreed to let her take first watch, that she would abandon them while they slept and left them in danger. Duncan too is upset, which strikes Merrick as odd as how attached he is to her. They talk about what to do next. Ghil wants to go after Genevieve, but that doesn't mean Merrick has to. Merrick tells them he will go with them, and they continue downwards. But it seems the darkspawn are on their trails. Ghil and Utha lead them through the deep and eventually realize that they will need to take a stand against the darkspawn. They find a large room with stairs leading up to an altar, and they take their stand at the altar. Ghil turns to Utha, strokes her cheek fondly for a moment, and she holds his hand to her face. A final goodbye. Ghil turns to Duncan and asks if he wants to leave, as unlike the others, he is stealthy enough to actually make it to find Genevieve. He refuses. Soon, the Darkspawn come pouring in. They fight, littering the stairs with Darkspawn corpses. Fiona casts fire spells, causing the room to flood with smoke. But so be it. Better to die by suffocation than by the Darkspawn. Eventually, an ogre is spotted. Merrick is able to wound it, but it grabs him. As it begins to tighten its fist around him, Fiona casts a giant lightning bolt to its chest, and he is able to kill it before he is tossed aside. Merrick is heavily wounded after crashing his head on the altar, and Fiona holds him as she pleads for him to stand. In the distance, he hears Hafter yelp and Ghil yelling. He thinks on how Logain will be able to raise Caelan better than he could, that he will do him right. But now, dying in Fiona's arms, he is content. She is so beautiful. But a large wave of magic strikes them all, a cold power he has never felt before. And now he is alone. Chapter 16. Blessed are they who stand before the corrupt and the wicked and do not falter. Blessed are the peacekeepers, the champions of the just. Duncan awakes to someone calling his name. He remembers the fight, being ran through, blood pouring out of his mouth. Where is he? He is chained in a small prison with the others, all but Merrick have awakened. They are all heavily wounded and their wounds have been treated and bandaged. Fiona asks how Duncan is and states that she is unable to cast because of her hands being tied down. Ghil is quietly petting Hafter. Uther looks angry at the chains. None of them know how they got there. Fiona asks for Duncan to check to see if Merrick is still alive, as none of them are able to reach him. He is. Ghil points out that the song is very loud here, but Duncan is confused. It seems he is the only one not hearing the calling. Even Fiona hears it a bit. Merrick soon wakes up and they begin to hear footsteps. Someone is coming. A trio of Darkspawn walk in, not having to unlock any doors, Duncan notices. Two were in heavy armor, the other in robes. Duncan realizes that the obvious female is Genevieve. The others are shocked. She speaks to them, her voice rougher than usual. She introduces them to her brother, Bregan, and the architect, who apologizes on how they almost died. Genevieve goes on to explain that this looks very bad, but they have an offer. They have a plan to end the blights. She explains that they plan to sneak past the Darkspawn, as now they no longer draw their attention, and they will find and kill the old gods, thus ending the calling and the blights and freeing the Darkspawn. Fiona is shocked, asking if they mean to tell the creature where the old gods are, to which Bregan replies that he already has. He says that this is only the first step, and the others will have to trust in them. Merrick asks what the other steps are, but he is ignored. He then asks what will happen if they refuse to help. Bregan answers that they will be kept here, and once their job is done, they will be returned to allies on the surface. Duncan notices that Genevieve is taken aback by the mention of other allies. It seems that she wasn't told everything either. They tell the group that they will give them some time to think it over and turn to leave, but Uther slams her hands on the ground. She doesn't need to think. She wants to join them. Ghil begs her to think just a bit more, but she is determined. The architect goes to Uther and takes her hand. Ghil looks away during the transformation, holding on to Hafter. He keeps his eyes closed as the shadow magic crawls off of her, as her hair falls out, and she now looks like Bregan and Genevieve. He continues to not look at Uther as she is freed from her chains and taken out of the cell. Genevieve asks the others. Ghil, still not looking, refuses to answer. Fiona is angered by her even asking. Duncan is confused, unsure how to answer. He doesn't want to let down Genevieve, but he hears Merrick whisper to refuse. Duncan eventually answers that he isn't sure. The trio and Uther leave. Ghil, still not looking, as Hafter nuzzles up to comfort him. The remaining group talk out what to do now. Duncan is still unsure, and Fiona and Merrick talk him out of joining. Ghil mentions that it must be the calling. The calling is said to make wardens crazy, and that's why this is happening. The architect is manipulating them all. Duncan says that it's their duty to end the blight, but Ghil corrects him. Our duty is to defend mankind from the blight. His voice was low and intense, and as he sat there, he seemed to become more and more certain of his words. There is a difference. We have stood up against the onslaught of the Darkspawn time and time again, and that is our task. It is not for us to judge, to gamble with the lives of those in our care, but it is for us to make the hard decisions that must be made. We cannot pretend that this also makes us gods. They need to get to the surface and warn the others of the architect and his allies. Duncan thinks on what Genevieve said in her dream. He thinks that perhaps she's not a superhuman after all, and that she does make mistakes. And she's scared her life isn't going to mean anything. That her reasons for going with this plan isn't really to stop the blight. Duncan takes a final stance. He will escape to the surface with the others. He puts his boots on his manacles and pushes them, dislocating his thumbs to free himself, then relocating them. And now, Duncan is free. The others are shocked that he can just do this, but he says that he has broken out of better prisons. He takes out his lockpicking set and begins to free the others. Discussion. So let's begin with Genevieve's dream. When Duncan is talking to the guard, he is told that the keep where Genevieve is living is called Garrote, and is located in the Nahashin marshes. I don't know how to pronounce this thing. Anyway, a garrote is something that you use to strangle someone. So, this is why Duncan is taken aback at the name, and then also why the guard has that clever anything that lives here is being choked out, and that's why they named the keep that. It's cute. Anyway, Yosh says, when they were going to face the demon, Catriel seems to have pounced. While it's not impossible that Moira was trapped in an endless nightmare, given that we don't know what happened after her death, it seems extremely unlikely. Then there's the fact that it was tailor-made to have the best chance of convincing Merrick to stay, so it's really convenient if it's true. So I don't believe her. Seems this particular spirit was playing the long game and earning Merrick's trust by helping him gather the others. I completely agree with this. Now, she did say that there are others stuck in their dreams other than Moira's, and she might be referring to the other dwarves, the skeletons we see in the throne room, so they might be stuck in a dream, perhaps even the Dwarven Prince himself, but definitely not Moira. I completely agree with Yosh, this is just a demon trick. If you remember, before the dream begins, Fiona was turned into an abomination. Her flesh was twisted and warped. But now that demon is gone, everything just seems fine. So I guess the huge transformation is just no big deal. Like, mages can just, balloon up into this giant monster and then shrink down, and their clothes are fine, everything's fine, doesn't have to worry about it, just very convenient. And honestly, as much as I really like the part with the demon in the dreams, it's just filler. It does little with the story other than something to drive Merrick and Fiona closer to one another, and even that's debatable. You can honestly skip this part of the novel and still kind of understand a lot of what's going on. So I'm torn on it. I really like it a lot, but it's just kind of there. The book also points out that Hafter seems to not be a part of the dream at all, which I guess is odd because the dog in Dragon Age Origins is dreaming. Perhaps that and Thetis Mabaris are the only ones who are able to dream, or maybe the demon didn't feel like the dog was worth it? I don't know. When Fiona talks about the circle, she talks like it was just as bigoted as everywhere else. This must be either an error or a regional difference, because both the Ferelden and the Kirkwall Circle treat elves with respect. And hell, later on, Fiona becomes the Grand Enchanter of all of the mages, and she was based in Orlais. I don't think things were as bad as she says, or if they were, they got a lot better in her lifetime, which I would, I guess, be surprised. Also, anyone else taken aback at the evil count that bought Fiona being named Dorian? This is obviously not our Dorian in Dragon Age Inquisition, and has absolutely no relation to the dude. But, as the two are written by the same guy, I wonder if Gaider just likes the name Dorian. Both Fiona and Genevieve comment that the ruins they eventually go into in Chapter 15 are deeper and older and have less statues than the deep roads and typical Dwarven stuff. There also seems to be an altar to some old Dwarven deity, which is unusual as current Dwarven spirituality has no altars or deities. So what is this place? Who are these people? I have no answers. As for a theory, so far the only thing we know of in the deep roads to have altars are the scaled ones. Could this have been their home? I have no idea. So, Anna writes, Wait, did I just miss something? Is it just me, or sex between Merrick and Fiona happens just because? Why? Okay, I never have been in close to death situations like them, so I don't know. Maybe people don't think clearly then. Maybe I'm biased, just as I said. I don't like the Sundari females, and I don't feel chemistry between them. So for me, this scene is very out of place. No, yeah, it just happens, I guess, which is odd considering that Merrick's relationship with Rowan and Catriel are so defined. This night with Fiona, which will result in Alistair, by the way, just seems like a one-night stand because Fiona just couldn't stand it anymore. I think what Fiona once said of this is to actually have a night with a good man. It kind of sounds like she's never had a sexual experience with a good guy, a guy that she actually respects. So maybe this is just like the chance she saw and she's like, fuck it, I'm taking it. Well, actually, literally, fuck it. But I think that's kind of what it's going for, but it's the sexual experience really sounds more like Fiona getting something out of it more than Merrick does. Like, Merrick might be... I think that Merrick is sleeping with Fiona here because he generally likes her and thinks she's really beautiful. And Fiona is sleeping with Merrick for almost very selfish reasons. Like, I don't think they would work in an actual relationship. I think the sex is almost very, like, primal in that way. But, which is interesting. You don't normally see that in Dragon Age, so I guess that's maybe what they're going for, where, like, Merrick isn't, like, absolutely in love with Fiona, but he does like her, and then Fiona's just like, I want a good lay, so, I don't know. Merrick being picked up by the ogre and almost crushed to death is eerily similar to how Kaelin dies. Perhaps if it helps other people, Merrick thinks that this isn't a bad way to die, so maybe Kaelin had some peace in his last moments too. And speaking of Kaelin, I find it ironic how much Merrick trusts in Logain to protect his son, and then that really didn't work out well. When Duncan sees the architect, he notices that his hand movements remind him of a priest. Perhaps a little hint at what he is long before we learn about Corypheus. A little fun fact, but when Uther confirms that she wants to go with the architect, the book describes that she's making a nodding gesture with her hand. In American Sign Language, at least, I don't know about others, this is literally just the sign for yes. I only took a few ASL classes, so the other hand motions the book describes haven't been super clear to me, but it is possible she is actually signing real stuff that I just don't understand. I did tweet out one of her descriptions of her hand motions on Twitter, and a lot of people were saying that it sounded like the sign for stop, which makes sense because the quote I used was her talking about stopping the blight. On Uther's corruption, Yosh writes, accelerating the taint seems to be getting easier to bear, suggesting that the architect is getting better at it. Granted, it could just be Uther's sheer willpower, but Bregan pretty much passed out after and slept for who knows how long after his ordeal, and Uther was fine after, if not during, the process. I'm not saying she didn't suffer any ill effects, but the difference is so great, and willpower can only do so much. I do agree. I'm just going to say, I like Uther better than Brian, so I want to believe that she has some hell of a willpower, but yeah, I think you're right. This is a weird little difference. And let's end on something that Flucus sent. Something Duncan realized at the end of the chapter before popping off his shackles really resonated with me. He realized that Genevieve, a semi-hero and surely a hero to Duncan, has gone too far. She became so fixated on what she wanted to accomplish that she lost sight of a warden's true meaning and intent, not simply stopping the blight, but also protecting others from it. It made me think of something I read recently about how staring into the abyss and the abyss stares back. We become what we love and or hate if we focus on it so hard that we lose sight of ourselves. And with that, thank you to everyone who submitted entries, and I look forward to what everyone else comes up with next. If you have any comments, artworks, or anything else, please send it in. Our next session will be the very last episode of The Calling, with chapters 17 through the epilogue. So please send me your comments, artwork, videos, literally anything else, by July 29th, 2018. Either comment below, send me an email at gilderthalon@gmail.com, tweet at gilderthalon on Twitter, or PM user Gilnon on Reddit. The rest are all.